In the heart of the Roman Republic, where marble temples gleamed and senators debated in crowded forums, a single man named Lucius Varro struggled to find meaning in his quiet life. Once a soldier in the legions, he now lived in the countryside, tending vineyards on the outskirts of Rome. But the empire was trembling. Whispers of barbarian invasions spread like wildfire, and the Senate was divided, unable to act decisively. Though weary and scarred from years of service, Lucius felt an old fire stirring within him, a calling that perhaps his story was not yet finished. The first signs of danger appeared when smoke rose from the northern hills. Villages burned, their people slaughtered or scattered. Raiders, brutal warriors from beyond the Rhine, had crossed into Roman territory. Lucius watched with grim eyes as refugees poured into the countryside, carrying only what they could salvage. Mothers wailed, children clung to fathers, and old men staggered under burdens too heavy for frail bones. Rome's commanders dismissed these reports as minor skirmishes, but Lucius knew better. He had fought these tribes before. They were relentless, moving like wolves, tearing apart weak prey. Rome's borders were collapsing, and no one seemed prepared.
One night, under a pale moon, Lucius gathered supplies: dried meat, water skins, a short sword, and his battered shield. He could not ignore the suffering around him. His farm, once a sanctuary, now seemed meaningless while his nation bled. He left behind his vineyard, stepping into the dangerous unknown. He was not young anymore, his hair streaked with gray, his shoulders heavy with years of battle, but survival had sharpened him. He swore silently that he would stand against the invaders, even if the Senate would not, for Rome was more than senators and generals. It was her people. Lucius journeyed north, slipping through dense forests and rocky hills. He moved cautiously, hiding his tracks, for enemy patrols roamed the countryside. The land was scarred: charred homes, broken wagons, livestock slain and left to rot. In one ruined village he found a single survivor, a boy barely 12. The child's eyes held terror. His voice cracked as he whispered that his family had been taken by raiders. Lucius could have left him, but he knew Rome's future lay in such children. Taking the boy by the hand, he swore to protect him, making survival a shared burden between them.
They lived as fugitives, moving at night, resting in caves and thickets. Lucius taught the boy to fish with sharpened sticks, to set traps for rabbits, and to stay silent when danger approached. Their bond deepened. The boy began to trust him, calling him pater. Yet danger never rested. One night, while gathering water from a stream, Lucius heard guttural voices. Barbarians marched nearby, their torches glowing in the darkness. He and the boy crouched in silence, breath shallow, as warriors passed so close they could hear leather creak and steel clink. Survival demanded patience, and Lucius mastered it. The boy, named Marcus, grew stronger each day, and with strength came courage. He begged Lucius to fight back, to strike at the raiders. Lucius hesitated. A single man and a boy could not wage war on an army, but when they stumbled upon a captured Roman patrol, their fate changed. The soldiers were chained, beaten, awaiting death. Lucius crept through shadows, striking swiftly. Old instincts returned, the thrust of a gladius, the weight of a shield. By dawn, the prisoners were free, their spirits reignited. Word spread among them: a lone veteran still fought for Rome's survival. The freed soldiers wanted to return to Rome, but Lucius urged them otherwise. If we scatter, Rome falls. If we stand, Rome survives. Though hesitant, they followed him. Soon a small band formed: farmers, refugees, wounded soldiers, and Marcus at his side. They were not an army, but Lucius gave them purpose. He drilled them with discipline, forged weapons from scavenged iron, and reminded them that Rome's strength lay not only in her legions, but in the will of her people. Around campfires, he spoke of duty, courage, and sacrifice. His words ignited hope where despair once lived. The ragged band shadowed the invaders, striking quickly and vanishing like ghosts. They ambushed patrols, rescued prisoners, and cut supply lines. Each victory, however small, gave Rome more time. The barbarians grew restless, frustrated by these unseen foes. Lucius knew their rage would soon boil over, but he also knew delay was his weapon. Every day they survived meant more time for Rome to muster defenses. Yet inside him, doubts gnawed. Could a handful of men truly alter the fate of a nation? He silenced these thoughts by sharpening his blade. Survival left no room for hesitation.
As weeks passed, Lucius's band grew. Villagers who once trembled with fear now carried spears. Farmers became fighters, bound not by rank but by necessity. Marcus, once timid, now stood tall beside him, wielding a blade with steady hands. Lucius watched with pride, but also fear. War stole innocence quickly. One evening, scouts brought grave news. The barbarian chieftain planned to march south, bypassing scattered defenses, and strike directly at Rome's gates. Lucius felt a chill. The city itself was unprepared. He realized his mission was no longer survival alone. It was to prevent Rome's destruction. That night, under starlight, Lucius devised a desperate plan. "We cannot face them head-on," he told his band, "but we can mislead them, lure them into the marshlands where their strength becomes weakness." The idea was perilous. They would act as bait, risking annihilation. Yet his people nodded with grim determination. Marcus spoke first. "If Rome falls, none of us survive anyway." Lucius felt both sorrow and pride in the boy's words. The line between child and soldier had vanished. Together, they prepared for the most dangerous gamble of their lives.
The next morning, their trap was set. Lucius's band lit false signal fires, leaving tracks that led deep into the marshes. When the barbarian warbands followed, shouting and howling, Lucius led his people in sudden strikes. Arrows whistled from reeds, spears struck from shadows, and raiders fell in confusion. Mud slowed their advance, armor weighed them down, and discipline collapsed. The marsh swallowed their fury. It was not a battle of swords alone. It was a battle of cunning. Lucius wielded survival itself as a weapon, turning nature against the invaders. For the first time, Rome had hope.
But victory was costly. Many of Lucius's men perished, their blood staining the marsh waters. Marcus fought valiantly, saving Lucius from an enemy spear, but the boy bore wounds of his own. Still, they endured. Survivors emerged from the reeds, battered yet unbroken. Word of their triumph spread quickly, carried by refugees and scouts. In Rome, senators whispered of a nameless veteran who had turned the tide. The people spoke of him with reverence, calling him the last guardian. Yet Lucius cared little for glory. His only thought was survival, for Marcus, for his band, for Rome. The barbarian chieftain, humiliated, vowed revenge. He marshaled his forces for one decisive strike, determined to crush this phantom enemy. Lucius knew the final confrontation was inevitable. He gathered his weary fighters, speaking with quiet strength. "We may not live to see tomorrow, but if we stand tonight, Rome will live for centuries." His words stirred their hearts, for he did not promise safety, only meaning. They chose to fight, not because survival was certain, but because Rome's survival demanded their sacrifice. That night, under a blood-red sky, they prepared for their last stand.
The clash came at dawn. The barbarians descended like a storm, their war cries shaking the earth. Lucius's band fought with desperate fury. Shields splintered, swords shattered, yet still they resisted. Marcus, though wounded, fought beside Lucius, his eyes alight with unyielding courage. For hours the marsh echoed with the screams of men and the clash of steel. Lucius felt exhaustion grip him, but he refused to yield. Each strike, each parry was more than survival. It was defiance. By sundown, the ground was littered with bodies, but the barbarians, bloodied and broken, finally began to retreat. Rome had been saved, not by legions nor by senators, but by a handful of nameless souls led by one weary veteran. As silence fell over the battlefield, Lucius knelt beside Marcus, who lay pale from wounds. The boy smiled weakly. We survived, Pater." Tears blurred Lucius's vision as he clasped the boy's hand. "Yes, Marcus, we did." For the first time in weeks, hope bloomed not as a fragile ember, but as a blazing fire. Rome would endure because ordinary men had refused to surrender. Survival had become salvation. In the weeks that followed, Lucius refused recognition. When envoys from the Senate came to honor him, he turned away, choosing to remain with his people in the countryside. His vineyard, overgrown and untended, still stood waiting. He rebuilt it with Marcus at his side, turning blood-soaked memories into seeds of peace. Yet his name became legend. Travelers spoke of a lone guardian who had risen when Rome faltered.
Children whispered his tale as bedtime stories, and soldiers drew courage from his example. Lucius had not sought glory, but glory had found him nonetheless. As years passed, Marcus grew into a strong leader, guiding villages with wisdom he had learned in the marshes. Lucius, though older and frailer, still carried the fire within. Sometimes he would sit beneath the vines, watching the horizon. He knew enemies would always threaten Rome, but he also knew that as long as ordinary people rose with courage, the empire would never truly fall. Survival was not just a fight against death. It was a choice to live with honor, to protect what mattered, even when hope seemed lost. That was the true strength of Rome.
On quiet nights, Marcus often asked him, "Do you regret it, leaving your vineyard to fight?" Lucius would smile faintly. "No, my son. The vineyard feeds the body, but Rome feeds the soul." He believed that survival was never meant for the individual alone, but for the community, the nation, the dream that outlived generations. His scars remained, both on his flesh and in his heart, but they were not burdens, they were reminders of the price paid for survival and freedom. Lucius carried them with pride, symbols of his unshakable duty to Rome. When Lucius's final days approached, he asked to be buried not among senators or generals, but in the fields he had defended. Villagers gathered, placing olive branches on his grave. Marcus stood tall, his voice steady as he declared, "This man did not save Rome with armies or riches. He saved it with courage, sacrifice, and love." The people wept, not with sorrow alone, but with gratitude. For Lucius Varro was more than a soldier. He was proof that one man's survival could become the survival of an entire nation. His legacy would never fade.
Centuries later, when Rome itself crumbled beneath the weight of time, stories of Lucius lived on. Scholars wrote of emperors and senators, but among the common people, his legend endured. They called him Custos Ultimus, the last guardian. His tale was whispered in taverns, carved into stone, sung by bards across the lands Rome once ruled. For though empires rise and fall, the courage of one man can echo through eternity. Lucius's survival had not only saved a nation, it had preserved its soul. In the end, survival was never about living, it was about ensuring Rome would never die.